They say the strongest souls are the ones who suffer in silence, the ones who hold everyone else together, while quietly falling apart inside. You can often recognize them by their calmness, their composure, their unshakable presence. They are the friends who never burden others, the partners who carry the weight of two hearts, the leaders who stand tall when everyone else crumbles. They seem invincible, but Carl Jung warned that such invincibility comes at a cost. He once wrote, "The greatest danger in times of turbulence is not the turbulence, it is to act with yesterday's logic." And for the strongest souls, that logic is simple: endure. Endure through pain. Endure through fear. Endure through exhaustion. Until one day, something inside begins to fracture. It's never loud at first. It starts quietly, an unexplainable sadness, an emptiness that no victory can fill. You wake up and realize that the strength that once protected you has become a cage. You've become addicted to your own resilience, trapped by the very identity that once made you powerful. And then, inevitably, the breaking comes. Jung believed that this breaking is not the end of strength, it is the beginning of authenticity. He called it enantiodromia, the tendency of things to turn into their opposite. When strength becomes too rigid, it collapses. When light denies the dark consumes it. And when the soul spends too long pretending to be whole, it finally shatters to reveal what lies beneath. The breaking of the strong soul is the psyche's rebellion against perfection. It is life demanding to be felt again. In Jung's words, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. Because pain is the voice of the self calling the ego to awaken. It says, "You have carried the world for too long. Now it's time to carry yourself." For some, this collapse looks like burnout. For others, it's anxiety, depression, or a loss of meaning. The symptoms vary, but the essence is the same. The unconscious has risen to reclaim what was buried beneath the armor of strength. Vulnerability, fear, grief, tenderness, the parts of us that make us human. Jung called this confrontation the night sea journey. It is the moment when the hero realizes he cannot fight his way out of the abyss. He must surrender to it, because the very thing he has resisted, weakness, emotion, dependency, is what holds the key to his wholeness. And this, Jung said, is where transformation begins. The strongest souls do not break because they are weak. They break because they have reached the limit of pretending they do not need healing. Their breakdown is not failure, it is an initiation. An initiation into the deeper self, the truer self, the one that no longer measures worth in endurance, but in honesty. You see, there comes a time when strength must die, so that wisdom can be born. And that death feels like despair, but it is really resurrection in disguise. Because when the mask of invincibility falls, something real finally emerges. A self that is not perfect, but whole. A self that no longer fears falling apart, because it has already survived it. Today we will walk through Jung's hidden truth about the breaking of strong souls. We'll uncover why the psyche forces collapse as a path to rebirth, what it means to meet the parts of ourselves we've exiled, and how true resilience is born not from resistance, but from surrender. Because sometimes what looks like falling apart is the soul's way of finally coming together. The burden of strength, the mask that never cracks. In Jungian terms, every personality wears a mask, what he called the persona. It's the image we show the world, the version of ourselves we believe will be accepted, admired, or loved. For some, this mask is charm. For others, it is competence. But for the strongest souls, their mask is strength itself. They become the dependable ones, the fixers, the calm centers in the storm. Somewhere in childhood or early life, they learned, consciously or not, that being strong earns safety, love, or respect. They discovered that emotion made others uncomfortable, that showing pain brought rejection or chaos. So, they built their identity on control. And in doing so, they became what the world needed them to be, pillars. But pillars, no matter how tall, do not move. They hold the weight of everything around them, yet remain unseen. Jung said, "The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself and others think one is." The tragedy of the strong soul is that they begin to believe in their own mask. They start to measure worth in stability, identity in usefulness, and meaning in endurance. They say things like, "I can handle it. I don't want to bother anyone. I'm fine." But the unconscious hears what the conscious mind refuses to admit. It knows that behind those words lies fatigue, sorrow, and loneliness so deep it has become invisible. The mask, once a survival tool, becomes a prison, and the stronger it grows, the more fragile it becomes, because it must now protect against not just pain, but the fear of ever appearing weak. This is why Jung warned that repression always carries a cost. Every emotion that is denied goes underground into the unconscious. But it doesn't disappear, it waits. It grows in silence, gathering power until it finds a way to express itself, often through the body or behavior. The strongest souls often fall ill in ways medicine cannot easily explain. They develop anxiety that feels directionless, exhaustion that no rest can cure. They might even achieve everything they once dreamed of, only to find themselves feeling hollow, because the persona was never meant to bear the weight of the self. When a person becomes too identified with being strong, they begin to reject the parts of themselves that need love the most: their fear, their confusion, their tenderness. Jung called this rejected part the shadow. It holds everything we deny about ourselves, not just the dark impulses, but also our unmet needs and buried grief. For the strong soul, the shadow often appears as sudden emotional collapse, a moment when all the walls fall at once. It can come after a loss, a betrayal, or simply one quiet evening when they realize they no longer know who they are without something to hold up. Jung saw this collapse not as destruction, but as an invitation. The unconscious demands balance. What has been repressed must be brought to light. What has been overdeveloped must give space to what has been silenced. He wrote, "What you resist not only persists, but grows in size." The more the strong resist their own vulnerability, the louder it calls, until the body breaks, the mind cracks, or the soul withdraws into a silence that no words can reach. And when that happens, most people panic. They see it as weakness, a failure to keep everything together. But Jung would say, this is the psyche's natural way of healing itself. The breaking is not punishment, it's correction. The collapse of false strength is the beginning of true strength, because what the world calls falling apart is often just the shedding of a mask that has become too heavy to carry. To the outside world, the strong soul's breakdown looks sudden, inexplicable. But inside, it has been building for years. Every time they swallowed anger to keep the peace, every time they comforted others while silently bleeding, every time they smiled through tears, a crack appeared in the mask. And when it finally breaks, the question is not why did I fail? The real question is who was I trying to be all along? Jung believed that the ego must die many small deaths before the self can emerge. The death of the perfect one, the death of the caretaker, the death of the unbreakable, and with each death, life begins to flow again. The breaking of the strong soul, then, is not a tragedy. It is the soul reclaiming its right to feel. It is the moment the human heart says, I am tired of being a fortress. I want to be alive. Because true strength is not the absence of weakness. It is the courage to face it, and to love yourself anyway. The breaking point, when the soul rebels. Every strong soul has a breaking point. It rarely comes with a scream. More often, it arrives in silence. A quiet rebellion born from exhaustion, from being too understanding for too long. Jung once said, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." But what he didn't say outright, what he implied between the lines, is that pain has a threshold. Beyond that threshold, something ancient awakens. When the soul rebels, it doesn't seek vengeance. It seeks truth. For years, the strong ones carry the emotional weight of others, the fixers, the healers, the silent anchors. They believe that by holding the world steady, they can redeem its chaos. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, the balance begins to tilt. The very compassion that once gave them strength becomes a wound that won't close. They start to feel that terrible dissonance between their outer calm and their inner scream. And this is the breaking point. It begins as a subtle shift. They no longer rush to soothe everyone's pain. They no longer apologize for existing. The old script, the one that said, "You must always understand, you must always forgive, you must always carry," starts to lose its power. The soul, once compliant, starts to whisper, "No more." Jung described this as the moment when the shadow begins to demand its due. The parts of us we buried, anger, grief, resentment, fear, they revolt against the tyranny of our niceness. The psyche, tired of pretending, starts to dismantle its own illusions. What follows is chaos, but it's sacred chaos, the necessary undoing of everything false. Many mistake this moment for failure. They call it burnout, depression, withdrawal. But Jung would call it an initiation, the beginning of true individuation. It is the death of the persona, the mask you've worn for survival. The strong soul doesn't truly break, it sheds. Imagine a dam holding back a dark river. At first, the cracks seem harmless. Small leaks, moments of irritability, fatigue, tears without reason. But then the water roars through, unstoppable. The dam was never meant to hold forever, and when it finally collapses, it doesn't destroy the river. It liberates it. The current surges forward, carving new paths, washing away the rot of old pretenses. This is the soul's rebellion. To the outside world, it looks like collapse. To the inner world, it is rebirth. There comes a night, perhaps you've lived it, when the strong one stops answering messages, stops explaining themselves, stops trying to be understood. They sit in silence and feel the rawness of being alive, unguarded, unfiltered, unhealed. It's terrifying at first. The mind panics, searching for control. But beneath that panic is something holy, a realization that the self they've been protecting all this time was never truly them. Jung believed that the psyche carries a natural drive toward wholeness, a gravitational pull toward balance. When we suppress our pain, our anger, our shadow, that energy doesn't disappear. It builds pressure beneath the surface. The breaking point is that moment when the pressure can no longer be contained, when the soul reclaims its right to exist as a whole being, not just a good one. And here lies the paradox. The strongest souls break not because they are weak, but because they are finally strong enough to stop pretending. They are strong enough to face the flood instead of patching the dam. They are strong enough to let the old identity dissolve, to let themselves be remade in truth instead of illusion. Jung saw this breaking as the necessary prelude to transformation. He once noted that most people will do anything to avoid facing their own souls. But those who do, those who allow themselves to break, are the ones who become truly whole. You see, the soul's rebellion isn't against life. It's against the lie of who we were told to be. Against the endless performance of being fine. Against the quiet, exhausting death of authenticity. When the strong soul finally breaks, it doesn't lose itself, it finds itself. It meets, often for the first time, the vast and terrifying power that was hidden beneath its endurance. And once this happens, once the rebellion begins, there is no going back. The old self will beg for restoration, but the new one will refuse. The old habits, people-pleasing, self-silencing, emotional caretaking, will feel unnatural, foreign. The soul has remembered its power, and it won't submit again. This is what Jung called the confrontation with the unconscious, a descent into the depths where our forgotten selves wait. It is dark, yes. It is painful. But it is also where the real light begins. Because every breaking point, when faced with courage, becomes a turning point. And every soul that rebels against falsehood is on the verge of remembering who it was meant to be. The shadow's gift, what the pain reveals. When the soul breaks and the rebellion begins, something unexpected happens. Amid the wreckage of what once was, the masks, the defenses, the roles, there is silence. A strange, sacred stillness that feels almost unbearable. It is in this quiet aftermath that the true work begins. Jung called it shadow work, but he didn't mean it in the way self-help culture uses the term today. For him, the shadow was not the enemy. It was the unlived life, everything you've exiled from consciousness because it didn't fit the image you built of yourself. In that shadow lies your anger, your lust, your ambition, your jealousy, yes, but also your creativity, your courage, your forgotten joy. It is the storehouse of all you've denied. And when the breaking happens, when your false self collapses, the gate to that storehouse swings open. The pain you feel then is not punishment, it's revelation. Most people flee from it. They numb it, rationalize it, bury it under productivity or spiritual bypassing. But the ones who stay, the ones who sit in the rubble and listen, begin to hear the shadow speak. It doesn't whisper sweet affirmations. It tells hard truths. You're not as kind as you pretend. You're not as selfless as you claim. You crave power, control, validation, and love in ways that embarrass you. At first, this honesty feels brutal. You might think, I'm becoming worse. But Jung would say, no, you're becoming real. The shadow's gift is self-knowledge. It exposes your hypocrisy not to shame you, but to free you. Because until you own your darkness, you remain its slave. Consider this. The traits we hate most in others are often mirrors of our own disowned qualities. The narcissist we despise may reflect the vanity we hide. The coward we mock may reveal our own timidity. Jung wrote, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. That's the shadow speaking, showing you what you've refused to integrate. But there's a second, even deeper layer to this. Beneath the unpleasant truths lies buried gold. Jung called it the gold in the shadow. These are your repressed potentials, the talents, instincts, and passions you silenced to survive. The pain of the breaking point is the fire that melts the walls keeping that gold imprisoned. When the strong soul finally breaks open, it starts to remember. It remembers what it feels like to want things, fiercely, unapologetically. It remembers the joy of creation, the thrill of risk, the power of saying no and mean it. It remembers that love without self-respect is servitude. This remembering is not comfortable. It's violent, because every truth reclaimed from the shadow threatens the structures that kept you safe. The people who benefited from your compliance will resist your awakening. They'll say you've changed, that you're cold, selfish, not like you used to be. They're right. You've stopped performing. Jung said that the shadow, once integrated, becomes a source of strength, a kind of inner gravity that keeps you centered in storms. But integration doesn't mean acting out your darkness. It means making it conscious. It means acknowledging that you are both the saint and the sinner, the healer and the wounded, the destroyer and the creator, and learning to hold all of that without shame. That's what real maturity looks like. To be whole, not just good. When the pain finally reveals what it's been guarding, you see that your breaking was never destruction, it was alchemy. The old personality was burnt away so the soul could reclaim what it had lost in the name of survival. That's the paradox of transformation. The same darkness that once haunted you becomes the soil from which your wisdom grows. The same grief that hollowed you out becomes the vessel that can hold compassion. You no longer seek light by fleeing darkness. You find it within the darkness itself. You begin to understand what Jung meant when he said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Every wound you've carried becomes a doorway. Every breakdown, a descent into hidden knowledge. Every fragment of your shattered identity points to something that was trying to be born. This is the moment when your relationship with pain changes forever. You stop asking, why me? And start asking, what is this trying to show me? And when you do, something extraordinary happens. You begin to sense a power you've never known before. the quiet, indestructible strength of someone who has met themselves fully and no longer needs to run. You have seen what others refuse to see. You have walked through the fire that others fear to touch. You are no longer held together by illusion, but by truth. And truth, once awakened, does not break. The rebirth, when strength becomes serenity. There comes a day when the storm within finally calms. Not because the winds have died, but because you no longer fear the thunder. This is the quiet miracle that follows the breaking, the rebirth. It's not a triumphant, cinematic moment. It's subtle. You wake up one morning and something in you is still. You realize you no longer crave to prove anything. You don't need to explain your pain or justify your silence. You simply are. Jung often said that individuation, the process of becoming whole, begins with crisis but ends in serenity. After the confrontation with the shadow, the psyche reorganizes itself. The fragments of who you thought you were, the hero, the victim, the pleaser, the strong one, dissolve into a larger, truer self. That self doesn't seek validation. It doesn't need to control how others see it, because it has seen itself fully. This serenity is not weakness. It's the highest form of strength. It's the strength of someone who no longer fights battles that don't matter, who chooses peace, not because they're afraid of conflict, but because they finally understand that chaos outside means nothing if there's harmony within. The rebirth is not an event, it's a gradual reawakening. You start noticing beauty again, not as distraction but as recognition. The world seems more alive, colors deeper, moments more fragile. You feel the pain of others without drowning in it, because your empathy is no longer a wound, it's a wisdom. You've learned to hold space for darkness without being consumed by it. You've learned that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing harm. It means releasing the grip of resentment that kept you bound to your past. You've learned that strength isn't about endurance, it's about alignment. That real power isn't the loud, defiant scream of survival, it's the quiet knowing that you can start again, even after being broken. Carl Jung called this the transcendent function. It's the stage when opposites reconcile, when light and dark, ego and shadow, conscious and unconscious begin to cooperate instead of fight. It's the integration of what was once divided. And when that happens, a new energy enters your life. You stop living reactively. You start creating intentionally. The same experiences that once shattered you now become the raw material for wisdom, compassion, and art. You realize that your suffering wasn't meaningless, it was the initiation you needed to grow into who you were meant to be. You begin to notice a kind of divine rhythm guiding you, small coincidences, synchronicities, moments of inexplicable alignment. Jung believed the psyche communicates through such symbols when the inner and outer worlds begin to reflect each other. It's as if life itself starts to collaborate with your healing. And so, you move differently now. You speak slower. You listen deeper. You act with intention. You are no longer chasing peace, you embody it. The world may still be cruel. People may still misunderstand you. But their chaos no longer dictates your center. Because you've gone to the depths and returned. You've met your darkness and found light waiting inside it. You've learned that the strongest souls are not those who never break. They are those who break, descend, and rise softer, wiser, freer. To the outside world, this serenity may look like detachment. But it isn't. It's liberation. The cords of old expectations, fears, and dependencies have been severed. You are finally free, not of the world, but within it. You can love without losing yourself. You can give without resentment. You can walk away without bitterness. You now understand the quiet truth Jung devoted his life to exploring, that every descent into darkness carries the potential for rebirth, that every ending is a transformation in disguise. The pain that once felt like destruction was, in truth, the labor of the soul giving birth to its next form. And so, you no longer fear the breaking. You honor it, because you've seen what waits on the other side, not emptiness, but expansion. You've learned that the greatest gift of suffering is clarity. The greatest lesson of loss is love. And the greatest power a human can possess is peace. In that moment of quiet self-realization, the war within ends. You stand at the center of your being, not untouched by pain, but untouched by illusion. And for the first time, you feel something extraordinary, not triumph, not relief, but a deep, unshakable calm. The kind of calm that only comes from walking through fire and discovering you were the flame all along. The silence after the storm. When the strongest souls break, the world rarely notices. There's no applause, no grand finale, only silence. The kind of silence that comes after a storm has torn through the heart and left it bare. But if you listen closely, beneath that silence, something sacred begins to move. A soft hum, like the sound of new life forming in the ashes. Because what breaks is never the soul itself. What breaks is the shell around it, the armor built from expectations, fear, and survival. And when that shell shatters, the light trapped inside finally breathes. Jung believed that this breaking, this collapse of the false self, is not an ending but a beginning. It's the soul's rebellion against the smallness of the life you once accepted. It's the psyche saying, enough pretending. It's time to become whole. The world tells you to be strong by staying unbroken. Jung taught the opposite, that real strength is born from surrender. From daring to face the parts of yourself you've long avoided. From saying, yes, this too is me. So when you find yourself in that dark night, when everything you leaned on crumbles, don't rush to rebuild. Sit in the ruins. Let them teach you. Because what feels like loss is often liberation in disguise. And one day, when the light returns, and it always does, you'll look back and see that the breaking was the turning point. The moment your soul stopped surviving and started living. The moment you became not who the world wanted, but who you were always meant to be. So if you are breaking, let it happen. The world needs more souls who have been shattered and rebuilt by truth. Because those are the ones who carry peace wherever they go. Not the peace of avoidance, but the peace of understanding. And that peace is unbreakable.